Hey, Brad.
Hey, Jax, did you record?
I think so.
All right, cool. Hey, so here's an introduction. This is the pilot episode for a podcast with an undetermined number of episodes. We have lots of things to say, and we think other people value sometimes what we have to say, but generally it's only us that benefits from it, and maybe a small group of people. And so we want to be able to create a medium that other people can get access to it. So we decided we'd put together what it took to actually start.
Pretty much, yeah. I found that when either of us talk, it seems most of the people, whoever they are in the room, will stop and listen and ask questions because for whatever reason, I find our insights valuable and worthwhile. And so there's no reason we need to limit that to just the people in the room. We can share it with others.
And I think the reason for that is it's a real estate discussion. And when I say real estate, what I mean is that the two of us have an above average development of the 6 inches between our ears. I think we have done more work at developing the real estate that counts. And I think people, that resonates with them. I think they notice that. And some people certainly have specialties that they know better than us. Both of us, for some weird reason of fate or future, have a more broad set of understanding than most people.
Yeah, I think it's because both of us, neither of us pretend to be geniuses, but both of us are willing to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And we go find out, and we're happy to share what we find out with others. Let's introduce ourselves real quick, and let's jump into a topic.
All right, so I'm Brad Green. I am a business owner. I own a company called Go Green Enterprises. Locally, we call it Southwest Plumbing Supply. Online, we call it plumberstock.com. A big part of what my business does, just so you have some background on me, we have web fulfillment. So we run warehouses where we fulfill product. I run the web division. Also, because I have learned to hate politics over the years, I get involved to try and provide a counterbalance to it. And I'm currently the chairman of the Iron County Libertarian Party. I have formerly been very heavily involved in the Republican Party. I think at the greatest magnitude of that, I was the chairman of the Audit Committee, a member of the State Central Committee, and a member of the Executive Committee. That means I have lots of phone numbers of people whose names you know, and sometimes they respond.
Very good.
Is that decent?
Yeah,
That's
that's a good intro and who you are.
Oh, I left out the important stuff. I'm married.
Man, family man.
I'm
Christian.
married. I have 4 kids, and I want the future for them to be awesome.
Very good. I love it. I'm Richard Jensen. I go by the nickname Jax, J-A-X. I am a former military person in military intelligence. I'm currently an Enoch City councilman in Enoch City in Iron County, Utah. I'm chairman of the board for Simon Fest, a local theater company. I'm involved in the Libertarian Party in the county and the state and trying to get a little more involved nationally. I'm a husband and father. I have 9 kids who I also, just about everything I do is to improve their future and make sure they have a great life. So. What do you want to talk about?
Very good. All right. So today is May 11th, 2023. And in my opinion, the most noteworthy news in this cycle is the ending of Title 42, which for those that don't know those silly political monikers, Title 42 is immigration policy for the United States of America. And there's been a lot of doom and gloom or otherwise conflict and controversy over the ending of Title 42, but it has ended. And so,
a few hours ago, about 6 hours ago or so.
And so I think what we got to talk about is we got to talk about immigration, legal and illegal. I think if we should talk about if we were in charge or people like us were in charge, what immigration would look like in that what we perceive as a perfect world.
Yeah, let's do it. Obviously, every election cycle it pops up and is a big topic, and whether or not we're going to build a border wall, or whether or not we're going to use military, or the drugs pouring across the border, all these different types of items. And I think there's lots of solutions that are viable, and it seems like our government never seems to find any of them. And so instead they try to pick a little bit of all of the the worst parts of all of them. Maybe, I don't know. They mess it up all the time, and so yeah. Generally, I have nothing against immigrants. I think we should massively increase the number of legal immigrants that come in. Anyone who doesn't have a criminal record, let them come in.
Yeah, one of the principles that I adhere to, that I espouse, is people are assets.
Yeah.
Meaning we want people. Like, people are where the answers of the future's problems are going to come from, or the future answers of today's problems, either way or both.
Yeah.
We want people. We want good people to come and contribute. And I don't care. I mean, it seems to be there are people that won't admit it, but they don't want brown people in their neighborhood. There's other people that do want them in their state for political reasons, but they'd rather, again, not have them in their neighborhood. The industry that I'm in, there are lots of immigrants, probably both illegal and not, and they're hardworking immigrants, and I love that they're here.
Yeah, I let people in, and as soon as they do something criminal or prove that they're not the type of person we want in our society, send them away.
So here's the challenge for me. Like, I think currently the immigration issue is a dog whistle, and it clearly became so under Donald Trump, or really during his campaign. But I think it existed before that. I think Donald Trump just realized
every 4 years back to Reagan and further, it's an issue, and nobody ever fixes it.
I think Donald Trump just realized, hey, look, I can get a lot of the ignorant base. Sorry, that we're going to say it the way we believe it. The ignorant base would get on board if he just said, oh, all these immigrants are bad people, rapists, murderers, whatever. And
I'm not sure if that's exactly what he said, but
it is illegal to come across the border in violation of that country's laws. Now, I don't personally believe we need to have a big border, a big wall. I think the border delineates, hey, look, there's laws on this side that are probably different than the other side, and you're now under the jurisdiction of those laws. At which point, the laws, whether they are correct or not, criminalize behavior that is specifically written to be against the law. And so, yes, it is illegal to cross a border because that's what the law says.
Yes.
The law doesn't have to say that.
Right.
But the law does say that.
Yes, it is not fundamentally true that crossing the Rio Grande makes you a criminal. But nothing of the sort.
I cross borders all the time. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to do.
You're a big
I love
traveler.
exploring the world. But I'm lucky. I'm American born. I have a U.S. passport. I'm white, which shouldn't matter, but for some reason it does, especially in the Philippines. They love white people. White privilege is real in the Philippines. Maybe it's real other places, but most unquestionably is real in the Philippines. And I'm wealthy. Now, I'm not rich, but I have enough for my needs. And so everybody in the world loves having an American into their country, as long as it's not during COVID and I refuse to comply with their nonsense.
Yeah.
Because I fight against nonsense.
Right, so you and I can cross borders all the time, but because we have money, we pay a fee, it's legal for us. Poor people shouldn't be penalized just for being poor.
Right, so that takes me to the next thing. There's several things that I see with the reason our leaders, our government representatives, are criminalizing border crossing. The drug trade.
Absolutely.
Certainly, both sides have general disagreement on the drug trade. And I
Maybe in the future we talk about the whole drug war in general.
I tend to think that the heavy weaponization of the police state against drugs has actually made it so that only those that are willing to be the most violent can win in that marketplace. The problem underlying the drug war is that people want the drugs. There's a market for it. There's demand for it.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be somebody filling that demand. Now it's a black market, and only the most violent people can win in that game because it's a black market, because the police have already declared that they're going to use violence every chance they get. And so now only the most violent cartels can win. So essentially the war on drugs, Milton Friedman taught me this in a video, not personally. He said that the basic premise of the war on drugs is to help the big cartels. Maybe not the premise, but the result, the pragmatic.
Yeah, the up and comers were able to squash easily, and so we eliminate their competition for them, and all the big cartels can thrive.
Yeah. That's right. So the drug war is a reason why they say the borders need to be sealed up tighter. And my argument is the drug war is the reason why there's so much power, so many powerful people able to push people over the border. That's why there's money behind that migration, is because the war on drugs has made it very lucrative for those that are willing to stomp out their competition.
Right.
So the other thing, there's a two-factor thing, and both sides make fun of each other.
So the drugs is one, and the second one is split into two.
The second one is split into two.
Yes.
And here's the second one that I see. And again, the Democrats and Republicans.
Is this going to be they're
They-
taking my jobs, they're taking my
Yeah,
welfare?
they like slap each other. The Republicans are like, they're just coming here to get on welfare, and so then they're like, okay, that's a welfare problem. In my opinion, that whole thing goes away if we actually get to where people have to earn their own way, and welfare becomes a charity thing that's actually accountable, because that charity has to be able to justify the donations.
Mm-hmm.
Government steals it at the point of gun, and so they give it out willy nilly, and there's
Do
welfare
that
fraud
through
everywhere.
churches and Salvation Army, whatever. Pick your
Right, so that's the one. But,
Yeah.
then the other side, and this one comes from both Republicans and Democrats. They're going to come in here and take our jobs. They're going to come and they're going to work cheaper than us. And I'm like, hold on a minute. They can either work a job or they can be on welfare. Now, there's a third possible option: identity theft.
They work under the table and then they get welfare.
Well, so that's the other
you
thing.
can
By
kinda do
them
both.
being here illegally, they can't register. So
That's still
under
a
the
problem
table
with
is
the
the
welfare
only thing. So it's still a welfare state problem.
Yeah.
But you can't have both. And it's funny because I hear Democrats all the time telling Republicans, well, you say that it's a welfare problem, but then you say they're going to take our jobs, and you can't have both. Theoretically, you can, but I agree on premise it doesn't make that much sense. I value labor, and I think it costs a lot of money to live here. It costs far less money to live lots of other places. Even in Jackson's revered Missouri, there's an expense to living there.
There is.
In the Philippines, it's much cheaper to live. In India, generally, it's much cheaper. to
Yeah,
live.
Thailand especially, there's a
A
lot
lot of the labor
expatriates
laws
there.
in the U.S. make it more expensive. A lot of the taxes make it more expensive. There's a lot of things that make it more expensive.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, those are the two biggest ones. But here's a third one, and this one tugs at my heartstrings a little bit. Life sucks in a lot of places in the world.
It's hard. Always has been. You and I live one of the few lives in history that life is not hard. It's difficult. It sucks. You have to struggle all the time. And that still exists lots of places.
Yeah. Tyrants, conquerors, emperors, kings, pharaohs would have killed hundreds of thousands of people to live the life we live.
To be able to walk into a modern supermarket and pick the food you get to eat like that. Hey, within a couple hours, I can put you pick an ocean, and you can travel from one to the other. Yeah. Yeah. We live better than kings 100 years ago.
We live amazing lives. And realistically, technology, people are assets. All property value comes from human life value. Those two principles have created technological advancements that do benefit people around the globe.
Absolutely.
Although oftentimes that's retarded to some extent by political whims. You get to some of these areas in Africa where you have a warlord leading the country, and they don't allow cell phone communications because they don't want their people to be able to organize against them, things like that.
Yeah.
So, regardless, life sucks in a lot of places, and there's an easier opportunity in a place where at least the expectation is that you have rights, and there's certain things government is not allowed to do. And realistically, the Constitution of the United States, despite how horribly it has been trampled, still provides an element of defense. It is still a fairly effective shield when compared to the rest of the world. And as a result, because of that structure, which is unique in history, the quality of life here is more easily attained. The likelihood of opportunity is more level than ever before in history. And if you lived somewhere where it sucked, you'd want to be here too.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely I have no qualms against people wanting to come have a better life for them, their kids, their family, and even just to get the welfare. I mean, that is totally justifiable defense, and say, hey, I live in dirt roads and there's no power or whatever, and up there even poor people have cell phones, air conditioning, cars. and 1,000 channels on their TV. Like, yeah, the draw here is undeniable. The question is how do we deal with all the people that want to come? The whole world can't be here. So what's the answer then?
Well, my opinion on that. So there's two parts of this question that we're getting to. We're talking about, okay, if things were how they should be, what would it be? What you're asking is, okay, well, how can we accommodate the whole world? My opinion is nobody is as smart as everybody.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
The market governs that. If everybody tried to pour in here, what would happen to quality of life, prices, availability?
I would move to all the places they're moving out of.
There would be some of that. Why would that be exactly?
Because obviously at some point there's an equilibrium reached where it's better here and it's poor there, and as more and more people come in and the quality of life kind of deteriorates because it's crowded and more expensive and whatnot, eventually you reach an equilibrium and that problem kind of handles itself.
Right. So
if everyone tried to come, at some point we reach that point.
That is the core concept of economics, equilibrium. So at the point where the supply and the demand meet, essentially, it just gets worse or better from the other side of that equation. So if everybody tried to pour in here, there would be an automatic deterrent that nobody would have to enforce. You don't need any government for it. You don't need any agency over it. You don't even really need education for people. People are going to do the best that they can see for themselves. That's called self-interest. That's a good thing. That's totally okay. They're going to do the best that they can see for themselves, given what they've got to offer. And so what's going to happen is what would happen is people would come pouring in. They would pour into the place that was the most receptive or the most fertile ground for what they want to do. And then there'd be too many, theoretically, potentially. And so what would happen is as the crowds grew, the cost of living would grow, they would find themselves looking for somewhere else that made more sense. And so you would kind of have that balance out. Now, some areas are going to be more fertile than others. Some ground is more fertile than others. And so it can accommodate more, theoretically. Some places you're going to have public officials that are more proactive because there is a reasonably good role for government officials. And one of those would be building infrastructure so that they can potentially keep up with the growth that happens. Now, I think somebody building a subdivision should build their own infrastructure. But it makes sense for the city to then grow, or the county or whatever, to grow the roads, to grow the water lines, whatever, to improve the infrastructure to better service that new growth. And some areas are going to be more proactive than others. Others are going to say, well, we have a whole bunch of new people, we need a whole bunch of new swimming pools or gymnasiums. And so the roads, the drainage, the water will fall into disrepair.
Looking at you, Pleasant Grove.
While they try... Looking at you, Cedar City, Utah, while they try and have coliseums to keep everybody busy. And the areas that do a better job of accommodating and maintaining that fertile ground, those areas are able to keep a positive environment, and more people are going to want to be there. People are assets. You're going to continue to have more cool innovation. You're going to have better economy. Again, if you get out in front of it with infrastructure, that can be a good thing.
So what you're describing, you're saying that will happen across the nation, as people come in from other countries.
I think it happens everywhere in the world.
Right. What I was going to say is you see how that works within this nation anyway. People come and go from rural areas and they flee into cities they like, and that's mismanaged poorly, and so then they leave California in droves and they lose a congressional seat because so many people are going to Florida and Texas and they gain them. That natural ebb and flow. There's no government that controls whether or not they can cross the border from California to Texas, and they would love to.
California's trying.
They're trying. They're trying to penalize people, tax them even after they've moved out. But that kind of flow across borders and whatnot just happens naturally if you give people freedom. That equilibrium is reached as people just look after their self-interest and do what they find most desirable. And some will go to California, and some will go to Texas, and some will go to rural Missouri or northern Minnesota. Or people are so varied in desires and personality and likes and dislikes that they'll just find what's best for them and make the best of it. There's no way that government could or should try to dictate all that to people.
Because they're just people too.
Yeah.
And no one is as smart as everyone.
Yep. Nobody who attempts to make those decisions does nearly as good as just letting everyone make their own and do what's best for them. That's always better than me trying to say, I'm smart enough to control you all. They're always wrong.
Yep. All right. So then there's the other element. And this one is potentially the complicated element, and that is, okay, so you have a border, and you have laws, and how do you appropriately manage that stewardship? What government officials were expecting to get out ahead of roads and drainage. What about immigration?
So, as much as I just said you should just let people flow and it'll do what it wants, at the same time, you don't just let people flow in and out of your house. You're a business owner, we're in your offices now, and you've got a warehouse. You don't just let people come and go as they choose. You still defend.
Sure, but it's private. I mean, I own those things.
Right.
Right, the country nobody owns, right? I mean, we all collectively have some right to it, but it's just earth, which was given to us by God. Like, my brothers that live across the border are also God's children. Like, they have every same right to the land God created as I do.
Right, and so there's this thing on, do I get to control what happens there or not? Typically, I'd say no, just kind of let that flow, except we also have the things where government is stealing money out of your and my pocket in order to give it away as charity and welfare state type items.
So we already talked about how welfare state is a thing that shouldn't exist.
So as long as
that's a separate fight.
Right,
completely.
as long as there's these other things that are happening poorly, it's in our, it might be wrong, but it's in our self-interest to try to control the border so that this other thing that's wrong doesn't kill us. You might say, it's wrong to close that border and whatnot because of our principles, but if we don't close it, the government's going to just kill us with the taxes and the overregulation.
Sure, but I think we adjust to that too. So I'm going to do what is right, let the consequence follow kind of guy. Just because welfare sucks doesn't mean that everything else has to continue to suck. So I would say, look, it would actually maybe even give us leverage if we did what was right on the border and it really exposed that there was a welfare problem or an identity theft problem or a job problem. And we could then fix those things. We could say, look, maybe you ought to work for your own money. Maybe we need stronger charities so the people that actually have disabilities or incapabilities, incapacitations, I'm not sure what the right word is for that, could actually still survive. I mean, our humanity can take care of that and would if government didn't claim it was going to do it and do a piss poor job of it. So for me, I say, okay, look, we have these borders. The borders need to be clear so that they know they're crossing over into a new set of laws. Mm-hmm. And those laws are going to govern them. But then what? So I find myself saying, okay, well, what about invading armies? So we say, what, you can't drive a tank across the border? You can't bring in an AK-47 across the border? Like, because I'm totally okay with somebody bringing an AK-47 across the border. If you want to have an M16...
I think you and I should be allowed to have tanks if I have the resources to have my own F-16.
So make a rule that says you can't drive a tank across the border. The question then becomes, okay, well, we can't allow some foreign government to send troops over the border. But how do you tell the difference between what a troop is and what is a bunch of Afghan
that's the difficulty because
Taliban?
Was it 3 weeks ago they found out that the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, was running police stations in New York City, where they had party members loyal to China were enforcing Chinese law within American boundaries. So, is there some way to prevent that is not restrictive on the people who aren't doing it, right? Or do you just wait until you discover it and then squash it? That's the question. So here's my thing: is I think borders absolutely are necessary. They need to be distinct lines. Everyone knows where they are, and I think they need to be defended fiercely. Like, I think the role of the military is defend them. So I'd actually use them to defend the borders to stop illegal immigration. But there's going to be almost no illegal immigration because almost everyone can come legally, in my mind.
Sure, but then is it papers, please, at the borders for legal immigration?
Yeah, maybe. There's got to be some process to make sure you're not a criminal coming from somewhere, right? You're not coming under orders of one of the cartels, or you're not coming to enforce Chinese law.
So the criminality issue is tough for me, and the reason is because there's different laws everywhere.
Yeah.
And once somebody's served their time, paid their debt to society, forgiveness, redemption needs to be possible. I don't think somebody has to stay in somewhere that sucks because 20 years ago they did something that
Right,
that
but-
area said was
But you're
wrong.
not distinguishing between the person who went to jail and served their time and got out versus the one who's on the run.
Sure, but to figure out who's on the run, you almost, I mean, you think about what it takes.
You would need a worldwide government of
Think about the time
unbelievable
it takes
intelligence.
for a background check,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've had background checks done. I do background checks on employees. You think about the time it takes. I don't want somebody standing at the border. I don't want to have to set up a whole bunch of Hiltons at the border to put somebody up in a reasonable.
Why would we have to do that? If they want to stand there and sleep on the ground, that's their choice. You don't have to put them in homes.
Sure. What I'm saying is, okay, you got to wait 3 days before you can get in, right? It's like, okay, well, I just came here for, I don't have anywhere nearby. Like, what do? They're like, do you have
That's
to
their
call? Do
responsibility.
you have to call and make an appointment to cross the border? Like, that even takes it one step farther than papers, please.
Yeah. Call, these are the things you need to bring. If you show up without them, we don't let you in. I
So
guess.
I don't know. Here's an interesting.
It's not a good answer. I'm not pretending I have
No, I
the
get it.
answers.
So, like I said, this is a tear at the heartstrings issue
Yeah.
for me. So, here's the interesting thing. I learned the other day that passports didn't used to exist.
Yeah. Yeah, they used to.
The passports were a response to political turmoil during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening was when people would go to a country not knowing that just being their nationality in that country was a threat to their survival. And so the United States my understanding, was the first to create a passport, but it wasn't designed like the Nazi passports were.
No.
The United States said, okay, well, here's your passport. You tell us what countries, what nation states you're planning on going to, and we can tell you whether or not your
It's safe to
nationality
go there.
and your ethnicity is going to be safe in that place.
Yeah.
And so it was more government helping people get things done. It was service oriented.
And
But
it's still kind of that way in North America, going back and forth to Canada, back and forth to Mexico. At least when I was young, it was not strictly enforced, have to have your passport kind of stuff. And so the idea of always having to have one when you travel is really just becoming more restrictive as we
I think you
age.
do still have to have it. I mean, I went to Mexico recently, and we had to give our passports up for that.
I didn't
It
have
used
my
to
first
be-
passport until I was married with kids,
It
and I
used to
went to
be
Mexico
driver's
with that
license.
one.
When I went into Canada, driver's license was good enough. But first time I went into Canada, I was a kid. I had a driver's license, and so my parents showed theirs, and they were smuggling minors out of the country. By
Yeah.
today's standards.
Yeah.
Like you go to get on a cruise ship, even if you're leaving out of Miami and coming back to Miami, you have to have either a passport or an original birth certificate for adults or minors, which that seems almost like a security theater.
Yeah.
You think about a birth certificate for an adult, like anyway.
I've always laughed about that. I have to prove to you I was born. Here I am. I was born. How do you think I got here?
You're born in the USA. That's the whole point. Is I'm a citizen.
Dumb.
So I find myself going, okay, government's rules are enforced at the point of a gun. And I don't understand, nor do I expect anyone to understand the circumstance of all people in the world. And I expect that when someone does wrong and harms somebody, the government should be empowered to stop that person from doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe not preemptively unless it's clear. If it is imminent, they can stop it.
Yeah, if they say I'm gonna drive over to so and so's house and shoot them, yeah, you try to stop.
There's some
But,
due process there.
yeah.
So other than that, I don't think that the government has a moral role to intervene. And so I find myself back in the 20s and 30s, John Wayne days, ride your horse across the border.
20s and 30s is a little before John Wayne.
Well, I know, but he was portraying the 20s and 30s.
Yeah,
in the
okay, I
shows,
get
right?
you, yeah.
You can all go. You guys can all go to hell, and I'll go to Texas, right? Like,
Right.
so you just ride across the border. There was no checkpoint. There was no passports. But if you did something wrong, the heavy weight of government was there to stop you.
And what's interesting is we actually have the technology now to do that more today than they did then. Because then you could rob a bank in a little town in Texas and disappear to Wyoming, and they never find you. Nobody there has ever seen you. They didn't have the technology to actually protect themselves. Now we could go back to that 20s, 30s, unless you hurt somebody, we don't care. But now we have the ability to, through cameras and DNA and fingerprints and all that stuff, we could actually do a good job of tracking people down and finding them much better than they did then. So it'd actually be safer today to go back to that free government style you're describing than it was to even have it then. And they had it then, and it's slightly dangerous and bad things happen. There are nefarious people who do want to cause harm and do malevolent things. It's, for whatever reason, people today are unwilling to accept the risk that life is dangerous, and so they try to protect themselves at all costs. And that's what you're explaining to me. You know, the Border Patrol doesn't have to try to protect you from that person. As soon as he does something wrong, we go get him, and we protect you from him after the fact.
So then the question becomes, okay, what about an invading force? What about a foreign military? And there clearly are invasions that
Yes.
are easy to identify.
Mhm.
You know, military, machinery, equipment,
Uniforms.
massive hordes, uniforms. Could you have a swarm invasion? Yes.
Guerrilla warfare, yeah.
And I
absolutely.
think, and I think that there would be a significant amount of fear of that if you were to have my style of open borders with strict enforcement of laws. And so for me, in those instances, you can you can do a significant amount of prevention through reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd be like, look, I had this many of this nationality of people. And if you don't know the nationality, you guess at it based upon clothing, origin, skin tone, appearance, height.
Profiling works, yes.
So profiling, but not discriminatory profiling. Like, look,
No, yeah.
I had a bunch of people that looked like they're from Brazil walk across today. They could have been from Argentina, but I don't know.
They were speaking Portuguese and they looked like South Americans.
Yeah.
Bingo, Brazil.
So whatever. So now you have that reporting information. So if you see a massive swarm of some new characteristic, then you all of a sudden say, okay, well, we should be on the lookout for this. And maybe put out warning to people. And realistically, Americans have the ability, and have always had the ability, to defend themselves against aggressors. Now, we don't exercise that right.
That's maybe a problem, is the fact that people are unwilling to actually exercise their right to self-defense.
I get it.
They call for government to do it for them.
I get it. However, even the most pacifist people that I know, if there were a clear-cut example of when someone was coming to their turf to cause them harm, like actual or imminent harm, not just somebody letting their dog poop on the lawn, not just somebody building 3 stories of shed next to their house
Yeah.
and destroying their view, not somebody painting their fence the wrong color, like somebody actually causing them harm. That if you had a swarm invasion, even the most pacifist people I know, if they were armed, which not all of them are, but many of them that I know are armed, they would be ready to do that. They would be ready to fire back. They may not have adequate warning, but there's numbers. And maybe it's not optimal. But a swarm invasion would take a lot.
Yes.
And I think we would have plenty of warning.
I think...
And then I think you have recourse and punishment. And I think that it's important that we have a strong defense. And that defense needs to be able to go on to offense when aggressed against.
Yeah, I think it probably is optimal. It's just that modern Americans feel uncomfortable
They're scared
with
of their
the
own
danger.
shadow.
Yes.
Have you seen the meme with like the little girl and little boy in the corner, and the bunny rabbit is standing
Yeah.
in the corner, and it's like
They're terrified of the rabbit. It's like straight out of Monty Python.
and it's always the little kids in the corner. It says Americans. Like that one is always the same on the meme, and the bunny rabbit is whatever the fear of the day is, like
Yeah.
regional bank failings, cryptocurrency, gold backs,
Yeah.
freedom.
Yeah,
Like,
freedom, and they're no, it's scary. Somebody might do something I don't like.
all right,
Yeah.
so you people, if this ends up getting published and actually somebody watches it, which may or may not happen, but my guess is if we do 20 or 30 of these, there will be somebody that wants to go back and watch the pilot.
So the magic number seems to be 100. That only 1% of podcasts ever do 100 episodes.
Yeah, but they're not as scintillating as we are.
I mean, we are not much to look at. Well, I lied. We are a lot to look at, but we definitely have the brains
Most
to hold a
people-
conversation.
Most guys are half the man I am.
That's very true. Very true.
Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that.
What he was saying is, if you happen to watch this and you like it, feel free to stay tuned for look for future episodes and leave us a comment of some kind, depending on where we put this.
I remembered I was going
Telling us
somewhere.
the issues you want us to talk about, or
I was going somewhere else. Those of you,
or if you know somebody who's going to braid his beard, whatever.
those of you, do you know what they want to braid my beard in Tahoe Beach?
Yeah,
that day?
it's like $100.
They wanted $20 per strand. $20.
It's gonna be like $400.
And I was like, no, I'm not interested. I think that the lowest they offered was $6, but it was going to be like to do it fully. Like they wanted. There's like 100 of them times $6, $600 to break. Yeah, whatever. So somebody's going to watch this pilot episode someday, and they're going to be triggered by the things that we've said. Because essentially, what we've said is Mexicans might take your job, and that's okay. They might come get on welfare, and that's welfare's fault, not immigration's fault.
Fire your politicians.
Some criminals might come in here, we might not catch them in time, and you might have to stop them. Drugs will go away if we get rid of the drug laws.
Yeah.
And a swarm invasion by a foreign power should be allowed to walk across our border, and when they try and swarm you should shoot them yourself.
I love it.
Right?
I love it.
So one of those is going to trigger you, and my hope is that it creates a very interesting and very controversial comment thread. And trust me, Jax and I are tough enough, arrogant enough, and probably awake enough to be totally okay with whatever you have to say about us. So I welcome it. Bring it on, brother or sister, or yeah, that's all there is. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
There's another trigger.
There you go. We'll probably have lots of them.
All right.
If you have news of the day you want us to talk about, something you'd like to hear our opinion on, let us know.
So that is our plan. Our plan is to take relevant news from today and to talk about it and to apply the principles that we've learned, principles that create a higher likelihood for a successful, prosperous life and world. And so we're going to apply those principles that we understand, and we're going to try and teach those principles in the process by applying them to today's news.
Let's do it. Number 1 in the books, brother.
Good luck out there.
Take care.